Welcome back to PC Builder. I'm Jason. This is our January 2024 Q&A, and we've got crazy questions about what else? The GPU market. We had 4 GPUs launch. Right now, we've got crazy pricing stuff. We'll talk about the best 1440p GPU, including taking a head-to-head look at GPUs like the 7800 XT versus 4070 Super and the 7900 XT versus the 4070 Ti Super. We'll also take a look at, is 2024 going to be a good year to build a gaming PC, especially with SSD prices going up and new CPUs and GPUs launching. Remember, if you get value out of the video, please give it a like. This makes a huge difference to the channel, and of course, subscribe. Click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. With that, let's jump into it. Before that, this video is sponsored by VIP SCD Key. Say goodbye to crazy expensive Windows 10 licenses and that terrible Activate Windows 10 watermark. Right now, use the links in the video description, head over to VIP SCD Key, and get a Windows 10 Home or Pro OEM license for a great price. Pick your product license, then use the PC Builder discount code PC25 for an additional 25% off. Go to the activation settings on your PC, put in the code, and boom, you have a fully licensed Windows 10 for a crazy low price, which can be upgraded for free to Windows 11. Use the links in the video description below. Let's start off with where else GPU prices. Naturally Based Gamer asks, for how long will GPU prices keep adjusting after the RTX 4000 series supercards are introduced? Basically, will NVIDIA try and beat AMD in terms of price to performance? Let's get to that one in a second. No, NVIDIA never wants to try and beat AMD in terms of price to performance. They have a different business strategy, but let's talk about GPU prices overall. Now, we just got a huge amount of cards introduced. And in fact, the 4080 Super is coming next week. I think we're pretty close on the performance, where that performance is going to hit, and it's going to be $200 cheaper. So we've got a really accurate picture, and we're going to get into each of the individual, like the 4070 Ti Super versus the 7900 XT in just a moment in the video. But let's talk a general picture in terms of GPU prices. I think we are at the beginning of a GPU price war, and the reason we're at a GPU price war right now at the beginning one is because GPUs in the current generation are massively overvalued. They're massively overvalued. How do I know that? Basic economics. If an economics professor looked at it and said, the reason your product is not moving is because the price is too high for the demand. That's it. The reason the price is too high for the demand is because NVIDIA and AMD got used to the super cushy margins that they were able to extract during GPU mining days, when GPU miners, not gamers, GPU miners were buying up every card in sight, and they were buying thousands of cards, and they were buying them for any price they could get. Scalpers were in there, and AMD and NVIDIA were just, and all their board partners were making money hand over fist. And there's a little bit of a hangover now. They're trying to kind of keep the good times going. They kind of tried to do that for a while, but then, hey, we got all these older generation cards we can't even get rid of. So yeah, the price comes down, comes down, comes down. I think that same process is about to hit for the 7000 series on AMD side and for the 4000 series on NVIDIA side, because they have not produced the level of price to performance, at least especially NVIDIA has not really produced the level of price to performance people are expecting at the price points they're looking to charge. So expect those prices to continue to go down. Whether or not it is worth waiting for those prices to decay in that, it's hard to say. It's always hard to say. Remember, your time actually has value too. So take that into account. If the price is only going to go down $40 on a $900 card over the next, 2 months, would you have paid $20 a month to have that card? Probably. So it's just remember to kind of factor all that in. Let's jump into the best 1440p GPU in 2024, at least high refresh rate here. Abtahiraman asks, should I get an RX 7800 XT versus RTX 4070 Super versus RTX 4070? They want to play AAA titles, 1440p ultra settings, and they want to spend as little as I can. Well, I have some bad news for you. If you want those NVIDIA cards and you want to go ultra settings, they only have 12 gigs of VRAM. And you might say, Jason, well, that, the consoles don't really usually exceed 12 gigs of VRAM. So most games coming out should be able to play 1440p. That'll be okay. And this is what the questioner wants. They want 1440p ultra. But if you want to turn on ray tracing on any of these games, it's going to increase VRAM usage. And there are a handful of titles right now where you can definitely, on ultra settings with ultra ray tracing, you will basically tank the 4070 Super and 4070. Because of that, the 7800 XT will not. It's got 16 gigs of VRAM. So I will just say, yeah, I'm going to go 7800 XT for no other reason than the VRAM and the slight edge in rasterization over the 4070, the slight price to performance edge over the 4070 Super. I do not think a $600 card should only have 12 gigs of VRAM. That was always my problem with the 4070. I still don't see why you wouldn't pick up a $500 7800 XT instead. It just makes tons more sense. And I think this is an area where NVIDIA's just got to look at gamers want more VRAM. We didn't just want a small performance bump in that card, and it's okay. We'll take it. But then you also increase the price of it $50. So it's not like they gave you something for free. They gave you something and then they charged you even more for it. And while it makes it slightly better in terms of its price per frame than the 4070, the 7800 XT still crushes that thing. And 16 gigs of VRAM versus 12, 16 gigs of VRAM versus 12. To me, if they can't fix that, then all the performance in the world isn't worth it. We saw that with the 4070 Ti 12 gigabyte card. People didn't want that thing. They didn't want to spend $800 for 12 gigs of VRAM. I don't think they want to spend $600 for 12 gigs of VRAM. We're seeing that in the sales right now. So my recommendation, 7800 XT, and I think NVIDIA has to take the L on this one, and they actually have to get that 4070 Super closer to $500 to even start to consider it. What about the 7900 XT versus 4070 Ti Super? That's what Jacob Carlos asked. It's on sale right now. The 4070 Ti as well as the 7900 XT is all the way down. It was down to $709. It's back up to $720. And I did make a mistake in my video, which I should correct right now. I said that they have reduced the MSRP to $749. I apologize for that. It's not that the MSRP has been reduced, but the AMD is going to work to keep the pricing of that card around $750, which fine. I still think that card needs to be $700. I think the 4070 Ti Super needs to be, $750, but these are my opinions. But what's my recommendation? This might shock you. I really think it's an absolute toss-up. As long as the 4070 Ti Super is $800 and the 7900 XT is close to $710, I think it's a toss-up. If you're a ray tracing enthusiast, I like the 4070 Ti Super. It now becomes, with 16 gigs of VRAM, to me, the entry level for ray tracing. Now, we're about to get the 4080 Super for $999. You say, well, it's only $200 more. Man, $200 it's not chump change, okay? That's not chump change. If it is to you, great. Then get the 4080 Super. Heck, get the 4090 while you're at it. But I do think $200 starts to make a difference to a lot of people. So I just want to focus in on the value of these two cards. I do like the 7900 XT, especially if you just focus on rasterization, especially if you just want to push frame rates at 1440p. I think it's a better 1440p card because DLSS is slightly better than FSR at 4K. 1440p, 1080p, I don't even want to talk about upscaling. They're relatively useless technologies. I say relatively. I know there's some value to 1440p. I don't think it's worth paying a lot of extra money for. But DLSS, might be worth paying more money for at 4K. If you're going to play at 4K, because that upscaling does make a difference. It's way better at 4K, and these cards are fast enough to take advantage of it to kind of give you a nice little bump in frame rate. So I like both of them. In terms of creator purposes, AMD has absolutely closed the gap with NVIDIA in everything except Blender. Get on that, AMD. But if you're just a gamer and just want rasterization at 1440p, 7900 XT, great value. If you want 4K and you want ray tracing, the 4070 Ti Super, I think, is a decent enough value. All right, Mr. Bear has abandoned me for this segment. I'm sure he'll be back. His feeder just went off. He went to go eat his lunch. But Cozen asks, what about the RTX 4060 versus 7600 XT? They want to do some content creation on the side and stream. Honestly, either of those cards are going to be absolutely fine for content creation and streaming. I don't think that you have to get one over the other. But that being said, the 4060 is a terrible GPU at $300. Let's talk about the value here, because I do think this is important. And I went over this with AMD when I sat down with them at CES in Las Vegas. I actually think there's a third card in there that you should consider before any of those, and that's the 6700 XT. 12 gigabyte GPU. Look at the difference between that 76 average FPS. This is TechSpot's 7600 XT review data that they just released, and 6700 XT versus the 7600 XT versus the 4060. And I would even include the 3060 in there. If you absolutely have to have NVIDIA for some reason, I'd probably look at the 3060 before I looked at the 4060, just because 12 versus 8 gigs of VRAM, way more important than 4 more average FPS, right? So I would get the 3060 if you have to have NVIDIA. But honestly, 6700 XT, unless for some reason you are dead set on getting AV1 encoding. If you have to have AV1 encoding, that's where I see the 7600 XT possibly edging out the 6700 XT, because they're the same price, $329. The 16 versus 12 gigs of VRAM, totally irrelevant for this performance level of GPU. You want to talk about ray tracing, the 6700 XT outperforms the 4060, even though NVIDIA enjoys typically a performance advantage when you turn ray tracing on, the 6700 XT just starts from a way higher baseline, so the 4060 still never catches up, except I think in Spider-Man Remastered, it basically trades blows with it in that title. Otherwise, the 6700 XT, far superior card for just $30 more. That's the one I would get unless you need AV1 encoding 7600 XT. Do not buy an 8GB GPU for more than $230 maybe? All right, Mr. Bear has returned just in time to ask, what are the actual GPUs that can use ray tracing at 60 FPS? Looks like it doesn't make any sense to use it at 1080p, 1440p, you need a 4070 Ti Super or higher, question mark, and no AMD, question mark. Ray tracing is tough. Ray tracing to me is still in an early adoption phase where you're going to need to spend quite a bit of money to get good bang for your buck out of it. Otherwise, just turn the resolution on the games up. Why to get like console level performance at 1080p or 1440p with ray tracing and have to spend tons of money on your GPU when you could instead just turn the resolution up to 4K or something like that? That to me is really the way to go. Once you're at 4K, I think ray tracing is getting to the point where it's still early adoption. It's still early adoption. Here we are 5-6 years later. We're still in the early adoption phase of it. It's hard to do. It's not easy to do. It takes very powerful hardware and the software is catching up. And at 4K, that's where you can also really get the most benefit out of DLSS or FSR. So that would be my recommendation. And yes, I think the minimum GPUs for that, 4070 Ti Super, 16GB, or the 7900 XT, 20GB GPU. Now, all that being said, it depends on the games you also play. I think we overly focus on Cyberpunk 2077, for instance. It's basically like NVIDIA's little sandbox. And with an RTX 4090, you're still getting 40 FPS, even with path tracing and everything turned on. To me, I'm just like, if I want a console, I'm going to go buy, I'll go buy a PS5 tomorrow. I don't want a console experience. But for some people who are enthusiasts, that's great. There's a small segment of the gamer community that's super into that, and that's 2 thumbs up for them. But if you're just looking at, hey, there's games coming out now that turn on ray tracing by default, I want to be able to enable that, they generally work pretty well with AMD GPUs. Focus in on the games that you play. I would go to 4K resolution first, and then I would definitely recommend at least a 4070 Ti Super or higher. Otherwise, I just think you're not going to get a really good experience out of it. Let's talk about PC builds. What do you get for $1,000 in 2024 for a gaming PC build? That's what Berderkus wants to know. Sorry, I said that wrong. If you had a $1,000 budget going in 2024, what would I build to play games at 1080p/1440p? You're playing at 1440p at that budget level. 1080p is largely going away in terms of, except the ultra low budget stuff, which you can still do. Is it possible to squeeze a display in that budget? Absolutely it is. Hey, if you haven't watched our best build series, now I know we didn't do one for January because we had CES. It's going to start up again in February, and we're waiting for all these launches to come and to kind of really do that best build. We'll have another one coming soon, but check out our one from December. I believe we do a $750 1440p gaming PC build using a Ryzen 5000 or 12th gen Intel CPU. Very powerful for this level of gaming still, and still upgradable, especially, you know, the 5700X 3D is coming at the end of the month. I'm fingers crossed it's a good CPU for gaming. And if you haven't watched it, check out our best gaming monitor 2024 video. We just dropped it like days ago. And the monitor market has radically changed. You can now get mid-range 1440p performance monitors for $200, sometimes less, sometimes right around that $200 price point. So the market's radically changed and there's so much more value. That's why I know people like PC gaming's gotten so expensive. No, it hasn't. In fact, it's value vis-a-vis the consoles, right? The PS5 and the Xbox Series X, because they're standing still. They're not getting any better. They're 3 years old at this point. The value that you can get right now is so much better than a PS5. People say, oh, just go get a PS5. You can play. Yeah, but in some of those games, you're going to get like 15 or 20 FPS at times if you're lucky. And that's with all kinds of like little tricks that they use behind the scenes. Whereas you could build a gaming PC right now for $750. That'll absolutely trash that thing. For $1,000, you'll get a mouse, keyboard, you get a gaming monitor for it. You can kind of get all the fixings for it. I really love 2024 for building your own gaming PC. All right, we got a whole lot of questions on buy now or wait. Let's start with some random guy, love the name. Do I think it would be a good time to build now, or should we wait for the upcoming CPU and GPU releases this month? Yeah, wait till the end of the month. We got some interesting CPUs. I don't know that the Ryzen 8000 series APUs are really going to be interesting to gamers unless you're going to do AI kind of stuff. And then of course we've got the Ryzen 5700X 3D, which I think could be super interesting. Should you wait for Ryzen, I guess they're going to call it 9000, which is going to be the Zen 5 based Ryzen CPUs. I mean, because they're going to try and overcharge you again. Because Intel fell on its face for 14th gen, I think AMD is going to do what they did a couple years ago with the initial Ryzen 5000 pricing, where they went from like $200 to $300 basically on the 5600X, which is dumb. I wouldn't wait for that level of performance. Then we got the Finished Techie predictions for next gen GPUs. Oh boy. So we're talking about like the RX 8000 series and RTX 5000 series. Want to see my thoughts? They're planning to build late 2024, early 2025. I mean, I have bad news, which is that it looks like, given where the sales volume for RTX 4000 is going, that NVIDIA is dropping hints that they are going to push back the launch of the RTX 5000 series. They could launch it. Everything we're hearing is that they certainly could still hit their goal of late 2024, which would keep them on that every 2-year cadence. But I will say, it looks like they're going to do what they did last time. They still have huge volumes of cards that aren't selling. I don't see their sales picking up just yet. Maybe that'll change. If it doesn't, expect those cards to be pushed back. And here's the thing, don't believe any rumors right now you hear about the performance. It's going to be 3 times. You're crazy to buy something now because it's going to be 3 times as great in just a year. All these folks always come up with this stuff and it never pans out, really. Maybe the 5090 will be that level of performance, but NVIDIA's had a hard time further on down the stack getting that level of performance to scale, and they've been greedy and they keep dropping lower end dies into the higher end named cards. That's why the 4060 really should have been the 4050, because they're using 8107 in that, and the 107 die is if you look at the previous series, that went into the 3050. So that tells you where NVIDIA is at. So I never try and guess where the next generation is going to be this far out. It's absolutely insane. All right, here's the most upvoted question we had. 44 upvotes on this. Should we be panic buying SSDs now before they become higher priced? Yeah, probably. Now, what's going on with the SSD market, the NAND chip in particular? Well, we had the pandemic, and before the pandemic, the NAND chips were relatively expensive. Then we had the pandemic, and then they got stupid expensive, crazy expensive, because there was a shortage. As a result, these companies saw dollar signs. They're like, let's massively increase production. And then everyone got back to work. Of course, the lockdowns ended, and then they massively overproduced those chips, and the demand kind of went down because as people went back to work, there wasn't the demand for all the work from home, PC stuff, and other kind of stuff that you need. So all of a sudden they were left over with tons and tons of this. It feels like the GPU thing all over again with GPU money. I don't know who's the business planner at these corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations, by the way, that just never see these things coming and always get short-sighted. Now, some of these companies almost went bankrupt over the last couple of years because of this, but as a result, SSD prices were stupid cheap. You could get a 1 terabyte Gen 3 NVMe drive for like $35. Look at it now, it's more like $60. So yes, SSD prices are going up. We'll probably see the return of $100 for a terabyte at Gen 3, Gen 4 speeds. I hope that's not the case. We're not there yet. If you don't mind, snapping something up because you're going to build, go ahead and do that now. I don't think it's a terrible idea. It's basically taking a bet against future kind of price inflation there. But yes, prices are going up as much as 40%. That's at least what all the chip makers are saying. All that being said, I still think it's going to be 2024, great year to build a PC. You're going to spend an extra $30 on your SSD. I don't think that's a big deal. Remember, if you got value out of this video, please do give it a like. This guy really does appreciate it. And of course, subscribe, click that bell icon. That way you get notified when we release cool content. Hey, speaking of cool content, have you checked out our best gaming monitor video? I'm going to put it right there. Check it out. Amazing changes to the gaming monitor market. And we'll catch you on the next one.